We wake up, select our clothes, map our careers, and operate under the comforting assumption of sovereignty. We view our own lives as open terrain, completely unaware that we are moving through pre-designed, fluid pathways. We assume our daily triumphs are the direct yield of personal discipline, and our failures the consequence of individual weakness. We declare ourselves the absolute authors of our own outcomes. The silent physical topography of our surroundings acts as an ancient architecture of control, dictating the exact coordinates of our physical and mental movement. This diagram illustrates the choice matrix. It maps how spatial dynamics, algorithms, and social gravity act as continuous environmental inputs. These physical and digital forces feed directly into your cognitive processing centers, automatically computing your behavioral output. By breaking down the exact mathematics of human behavior, we can observe the mechanics of the system. The concrete you walk on, the screens you look at, and the peers surrounding you are actively calculating your future. Ignoring these environmental mathematics leaves us as blind passengers. We live out pre-scripted biological destinies, completely convinced we are making autonomous choices. The trajectory of a life begins with the geometry of its surroundings. Sociologists map this through spatial destiny. A neighborhood's layout operates as a rigid structural channel, routing human kinetic energy, visibly divided between dense concrete expanses and active green infrastructure. This equation models environmental stress load. When local concrete surface density and decibel levels rise, the body registers the high ambient noise and urban heat as chronic low-level threats, forcing a continuous physiological defense. Maintaining homeostasis against this hostility requires massive metabolic output. That energy is systematically diverted away from the prefrontal cortex, starving the exact neurological center required to project long-term ambition and evaluate future risks. Indoors, the structural manipulation continues. We spend 90% of our lives under static 5,000 Kelvin fluorescent lighting. This artificial environment subverts the natural cortisol and melatonin cycles driven by the sun, keeping the brain trapped in a perpetually dysregulated afternoon. An individual operating under these conditions is attempting to navigate complex career and life decisions with a biologically compromised brain. Their actions default to the path of least resistance because the environment has entirely depleted the physiological recovery to choose otherwise. Digital environments function with the same invisible rigidity. Social platforms do not operate as neutral public squares. They are highly optimized, high-dimensional vector spaces engineered to capture the ultimate scarce resource, your attention. This flowchart illustrates the algorithmic capture cycle. The engine's objective is mathematical. It maximizes engagement by calculating the cosine similarity between a user's latent psychological vulnerabilities and highly emotionally arousing content. This continuous delivery of optimized stimuli pre-primes the brain's associative networks. When a real-world decision arises, the brain accesses these heavily reinforced pathways. The resulting choice feels spontaneous, but it was statistically predicted and encouraged weeks prior. The consequences of this stress extend down to our cellular structures. Through the mechanics of epigenetics, chronic exposure to digital anxiety and physical noise forces chemical tags, known as methyl groups, to attach directly to our DNA, locking specific genes on or off. When the glucocorticoid receptor gene is systematically silenced by these tags, the biological system loses its capacity to process cortisol and shut down fear responses. The brain becomes locked in hypervigilance, prioritizing immediate self-soothing behaviors and short-term consumption to cope with the sensory overload. Optimized phage and hostile urban geometries lock molecular switches on our DNA, forcing the brain into a state of hypervigilance that dictates future behavior without conscious consent. Beyond space and screens, we are bound by the invisible physics of our peer networks. Under the tribal default, behaviors, health states, and emotional dispositions operate like contagious pathogens across social distances. Network sociologists have mapped how traits like obesity, smoking cessation, and happiness diffuse through populations. An individual's probability of adopting a behavior shifts dramatically based on their peers, with the influence remaining statistically potent up to 3 degrees of separation. This behavioral diffusion follows a strict social gravity equation. When you exist in a dense cluster of peers possessing high cultural mass, their collective momentum bends your behavioral velocity directly into their orbit. Mirror neurons ensure you unconsciously copy the exact moral frameworks and spending habits of your surroundings. This gravity establishes systems of either systemic scaffolding or systemic sabotage. High-capital environments automate long-term success with low noise, stable nutrition, and valuable mentorship networks. Low-capital environments guarantee persistent friction, forcing immense expenditures of conscious energy just to maintain baseline survival. The individual who escapes a hostile environment through sheer grit is a statistical anomaly. The vast majority of human behavior, achievement, and failure is a direct mathematical reflection of local socioeconomic gravity. If the coordinates of our habitation dictate our choices, true agency cannot rely on internal discipline. Taking control requires the deliberate external engineering of our physical and digital inputs. We can observe this engineering at scale. In one European urban reclamation project, planners removed 35% of paved roads, replacing them with dynamic green spaces and dropping local ambient noise by 18 decibels. The spatial re-engineering produced immediate biological changes. Over 3 years, community salivary cortisol levels dropped by 22%. The city altered the brain chemistry of its inhabitants entirely through physical architecture, without a single psychological intervention. On an individual scale, information architect David Vance treated his devices as severe cognitive hazards.
He stripped his workspace down